You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Miller.
And this is Ken Miller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. We're pleased to have back with us Joseph DiBernardo and James Napoli, both of the Nova Group. Guys, thank you so much for coming back on our show.
Thanks for having us, Ken and Jane.
Yeah, so we covered a lot of great things in the first show. I want to talk a little bit about the philosophy of the Nova Group. I know you guys specialize in the construction, real estate services, CRE, and structural evaluations. But I was reading on the website, the philosophy of Nova is to be a force for good for the people, to give back. They also mentioned Nova as a B Corp, using business as a force for good. Could you please expand upon that philosophy of Nova Group?
Yeah, absolutely. So our founder and CEO, Steve Cummings, great guy, always had planned to get to a point where everything that he started with his environmental engineering due diligence firm would come to something like this, and I think it exceeded his expectations. What we do is environmental due diligence, and that started over 30 years ago. Then it expanded to multidisciplinary services, i.e. construction services, structural services that James does, and zoning and ESG, environmental social governance. In general, his philosophy, he's, as much as he is a philanthropist and into the this business that he's created, we created a certified B corporation, and that generally talks about getting into the transparency and the high performance level and accountability of a company giving back to not only its employees but to charities, to material items and other entities within that space. So it has an assessment impact score that we have to reach every year, and we're held to a tight standard with that. But the company in itself will work within the climate space and the people, property, and planet realm, and will eventually, using other services and provide services for our clients, tie back into what we call using business as a force for good. And that's generally our MO, our mantra, and what we stand behind, and every employee stands behind.
Yeah.
I have to say we have the first, experience with your company being so generous, support a lot of good, deed and good activities in East Brunswick. That's really thank you. Always there and give back to the community.
Thanks for acknowledging that, Jane. And the company itself has actually a global presence where we try to practice the ESG and our philosophy. We are in North America, in Australia, in Europe, and in Asia. So it's kind of what our founder's entrepreneurial role was, to just get involved and to just kind of spread out and create the reputation that he has for us in this space.
Yeah, and that's very well reflected on your website. We encourage, the employees are encouraged to have the personal, the work life, personal life, and charitable balance. They want to encourage all the employees to give to their local charities, and I'm sure like the company gives on a very generous basis to a lot of charities too. So that philosophy is right on your home web page. So it's really,
it's not only on the page,
but it's implemented.
It's in the action.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So that's a really great philosophy, and the company's doing a lot of good because you have the environmental department, and you're helping. So you're doing a lot of responsible
to make the world much better when we found it. Yes.
And I think it goes back to the values of the individual. I know my father did engineering missionary work, and I knew it's in my roots, and it kind of puts me in the right company when everything is said and done.
Right, because you're protecting the environment, you're protecting the lender's money, and then we're also going to talk about how James is protecting the evaluation of structures. That could be that otherwise could be a safety. So you're protecting people's lives, which you don't realize that engineering, structural engineering, has a great impact, and it's a great safety thing for the society. So that's great. So before we get into the discussion of the structural engineering space requirements, if you want to just please give a brief recap for the listeners that weren't able to hear last week's show about the third-party construction services that you provide for the commercial industry.
So Nova Group provides third-party construction due diligence, environmental due diligence for lenders in the commercial real estate space. All type of lenders, in other words, USDA, CPACE, CMBS, commercial-backed mortgage securities, bridge lenders, SBA, SBL, private equity investors, and insurance cos. We work just for, you think of a bank and we probably work for them. We work on a national basis, a global basis, but more particularly in America, we work with just about every asset type: multifamily, industrial, retail, hospitality, in various sizes from under $1 million to several hundred million. And our group provides the construction due diligence for lenders, and we provide services like construction document and plan reviews, budget reviews, owner's rep services, construction monitoring services, funds control, structural engineering regulatory services, which we'll talk about in a minute. And for, like I said, just about all of our lenders and our clients.
Mm-hmm. And that's pretty cool, not only the United States, but also worldwide. So do you guys have any offices outside of the U.S.?
We do, yes.
You do?
We do. We have, like, for example, London is one of our popular offices. They have a presence in West Berlin. They have a presence in the UK, in Asia, and there's offices I hear about opening up all the time, and they could be regional offices. We work. I live in New Jersey, coastal, central Jersey. Work in Manhattan, and see a lot of bankers and finance folks there. But a lot of times I'll see people coming in from out of town and just stopping in the office to say hello, which is kind of nice.
And that's really interesting, having the out-of-the-country experience, because the regulations are different on the environmental, the building codes. So you have to have people well-versed in the particular country that they're working in, because the regulations could be more stringent, less stringent. But you really have to know, and plus the language, you have to have people, the language barrier. So you really have to have the versatility on your staff and your team.
Yeah.
And do you get to travel, since you're the VP of the construction department? Have you had the opportunity to travel to any countries for some of the big projects?
Well, I don't get involved with the European work. I think I have enough to handle.
Sure.
At home.
Yeah. No, I was just
But at the same time, there's opportunities we can go. I do just traveling, across the country, conferences, meetings with clients. We have a good client base, so always on the road. But yeah, one of these days I'll make a trip to our European or maybe our Asian office. We'll see.
Pretty
Go
cool.
to your Australia office.
Australia, that's a long flight. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you guys are headquartered in Minnesota, right? That's
Yes.
what it said.
We're in Minneapolis,
yeah.
and we, like I said, have regional offices all across the country.
Wow. Yeah. It's really great. All right. So now we're going to give your colleague, James, a chance to talk about the structural engineering services that you guys provide. You've been patiently waiting, so
Yes,
thank
sir.
you for your patience. And I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So Nova being primarily rooted in due diligence, construction real estate due diligence, a lot of times we'll flag some colleagues of mine around the country will flag certain things that have to do with structural evaluations on buildings. Crack here, a missing brick there, maybe a settled foundation here or there. And what we're doing in New York now is setting up our own ability to help property owners, property managers actually get to the bottom of what's happening with those issues and then resolve them. So two things I'd really like to start talking about is it's birthed in New York. New York City is where I'm primarily doing a lot of work, but they're kind of like the catalyst for the other Jersey suburbs around here. Oftentimes Jersey City, Newark, they'll kind of follow suit in what New York City's doing. So one aspect I'd like to talk about is the facade inspection and safety program. So this is really what, whenever you go to the New York and you see these big ugly green sheds all around here, the reasons why is because it's protecting the public, right? We've got a lot of old stock buildings, 100-year-old buildings with frankly, a lot of them have not been maintained the way that they should. So the facade inspection and safety program, it's called Local Law 11 in some circles in New York City, is implemented by New York, where they have to ask certain professionals, professional engineers or architects who are qualified exterior wall inspectors to do critical examinations of buildings. And that's kind of the world that I'm living in right now.
Okay. And so the facade inspection, what does that entail? You're looking just superficially at the facade of the building and not the foundation, or?
Yeah, so the facade inspection safety program has kind of evolved over the years. It's a few decades old, actually, and I think that over the years and over the cycles, it's on a 5-year cycle, it's gotten a little bit more stringent. So it's twofold. We look at a visual examination from the ground surfaces, from adjacent rooftop surfaces, and things like that. Telephoto lenses. I have big, cool binoculars that I used. But it also gets a little bit more in depth, where we have to do an up-close physical examination. So that involves sometimes suspended scaffolding. We'll get a 250-foot aerial man lift and go up and actually touch, see, taste, if you will, how the building's performing.
Yeah, hopefully not on a windy day, right?
Well, we've been up there in some windy
day
situations
rain,
before,
yeah. So let's talk now, before we get into the other things. Like, so this is a mandate, you said, by a New York City local law, that they require all building owners to implement this facade inspection, and it's what, every 5 years it must be done? That's
right, yeah.
Okay.
So it's on a 5-year cycle. The way that the law is written actually is for buildings 6 stories and above, right? So we're taking a close look at all those buildings every 5 years, but it's going to be expanded soon, I believe.
Okay, great. Why don't we take a short break? We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back to our show. We're going to continue our discussion with James Napoli about the structural inspections, the facade inspections that are a mandate in New York City. And I guess in New Jersey right now, there's not a mandate for the facade inspections yet?
Yeah, well, so certain municipalities, certain cities within New Jersey are following suit, kind of following what New York City does. I know that a few years back there was a major building collapse in Miami, and it was kind of like an impetus for Jersey City and Newark to get on board and sort of mandate that this stuff gets done as well. But in New York, as I was saying, it's pretty much all buildings that are over 6 stories on a 5-year cycle, which kind of leaves the question, what about the buildings underneath 5 stories?
Right.
And
Yes.
typically, from my perspective, those are the ones that are in the worst shape, because no one's telling these building owners that they have to maintain it, right? So I think that the laws are going to be expanding a little bit to see a little bit more compliance, get these building owners to take care of it, because ultimately it's a public safety issue. There's been some high-profile cases where pieces of bricks or something have come off and resulted in fatalities as well. So.
And also for the owner perspective, I understand costs money to maintain, to do these studies, but ultimately protect their asset. At the end of the day, it's their building.
And protect their insurance,
Yes.
because if God forbid there's
Absolutely.
an accident, which you're going to, it's obviously the life safety is the most important, but secondarily is the insurance will go up, the liability insurance will go skyrocket. And maybe I wouldn't be surprised if insurance companies would start mandating
Absolutely.
that, because just to change the topic slightly, we have there's condominiums that have to replace that. They got a mandate from the lawyer to replace the Federal Pacific panels because they've been proven to be a fire hazard. So
That was the insurance
that's the case
company.
where the insurance companies are saying we're not going to insure this condominium because of the fact they've got the Federal Pacific panels.
Yep.
So that's the same analogous with what could go on with the building facades if they're not inspected on a regular basis.
Good point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, there are costs associated with maintaining these buildings, but the benefits far outweigh the costs.
Yes.
As far as public safety, and you won't be able to do business if you allow one of your buildings to deteriorate to the point where things are actually falling off of it.
Just like a car, right?
Just-
there's
yeah.
a cost maintaining your car.
And there's an
but at
inspection
least you have a
service,
car
yeah.
you can drive.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Yeah. And what about new buildings, new construction? Are they grandfathered for a particular number of years before they have to start on this 5-year cycle?
Well, they get 5 years.
They get 5 years.
five
Okay.
years,
yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
They probably
like I said, the law is always evolving, and nowadays, with the type of construction that's evolving as well, a lot of newer buildings are utilizing cavity wall systems. I won't get into the technicalities of it, but the building department has got onto the fact that they haven't been really built correctly over the last 10, 15 years. So that's just another layer that they wanted us to investigate during this last ninth cycle of the law, which just ended in February, actually.
And the parapets as well, right?
Yeah, it's expanding to all the parts. Now every building within all 5 boroughs of New York needs to have a annual parapet assessment, other than 1 and 2 family homes.
An annual interest.
And it's also expanding to parking garages. So a lot of people might have heard about the pretty high-profile collapse that happened on Ann Street in Manhattan. It resulted in fatality as well. Unfortunately, it was just a year too late. New York City just implemented a similar program than the facade program focused at parking structures. And we're getting a lot of clients, a lot of calls to look at those as well now.
And I can see that's important. You have a lot of cars, a lot of weight going into structures that they have to be make sure the integrity is there. Otherwise, it could be a lot of fatalities involved. When you getting back to the building inspections, the facade, what about the foundations of the buildings? Do you guys inspect the basements or the exposed parts of the foundations, like the masonry, the cinder block, and see if there's any vertical cracking or any?
Yeah. So as far as like our general structural engineering, structural forensic investigations go, it's a service that we provide, and we're always looking at all sorts of different things. In New York, there's not a specific structural eval. In Jersey City, there is. So there's not really on a national basis where these laws are leveled out. I'm seeing a lot of all different cities around the nation have different regulations, and they've tweaked a little bit, but they're all really generally for the protection of the public.
Right, and I imagine it probably expands to cover bridges, right? Because there's so much traffic going over the bridges. They must have. Hopefully, they have some type of bridge inspection program to prevent any fatalities from like the Verrazano Bridge. Or
yeah, there certainly is. More government agencies take care of that. Department of Transportation and certain bridge contractors. It's a pretty specialized field.
Yeah. Okay, so the parking structures, what is the process for that? And it's a 6-year cycle on the parking?
Yeah, so this is rather new. A lot of people, unfortunately, haven't heard about it, even parking owners we've seen. But it's essentially the same. So we're evaluating parking structures on a 6-year cycle. This is a new law. We just finished the first sub-cycle 1A at the end of 2023. So a lot of buildings are now non-compliant. And what we do is we give them a rating, 1 out of 3 choices. It's either safe, it's safe with a repair and engineering monitoring program, or it's unsafe. And if it is unsafe, then we work with building owners and property managers to bring it up to compliance. So we'll create plans and documents and oversee the construction to bring it up to speed as well.
So if it is unsafe, if it's ruled unsafe, what's the implication for the occupants? Or if it's a parking garage that's unsafe, can you still, or do they have to shut down?
In certain circumstances, they'll shut it down. In certain circumstances, the unsafe conditions will be limited to a certain area. So maybe we'll ask that vacate that area. But once that it's flagged like this, the building department's on notice, and they're giving regular interviews to get this up to speed. So you got to engage the contractor right away and start the work. Like I said, there's been a collapse recently in the last 6 months. The Amtrak got shut down due to a falling concrete onto an Amtrak from a parking garage. And parking garages in New York, at least, are typically in the cellar and they're hidden, right? So people aren't going down there unless it's their parking lot attendants. And they're subject to a lot of stress because salt water coming in on cars, carbonation from the car exhaust and things like that. So a lot of them are showing their age. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, so it's quite an important service. How is the regulatory enforcement on this? Because I mean, the laws are great, and people voluntarily comply. That's one thing. But I would imagine the city would have to have a task force dedicated to monitoring this. Otherwise it would be a paper law without any bite to it. Sure.
So the onus is on owners to hire professionals and do it. And just with the large stock of buildings in New York, they can't be expected to perform this assessment on their own. Now, they do have task force here and there where they'll go ahead and inspect properties and issue violations. There's also, for the public, can call 311 and report things like this, and then the building department will go out and investigate. But it is the qualified exterior wall inspector or the QPSI, qualified parking structure inspector. We're sort of the first line of defense on that. And when we do encounter unsafe conditions or things of that nature, we work with the building department hand in hand. So.
Right. And what's been the outreach? Like how, if I own a garage in the city, I mean, have I been notified? Has the city taken some initiative to notify all the owners of buildings that they have to do these inspections, or there could be owners out there that are ignorant of these requirements?
Unfortunately, a lot of them will hear about it when they get their first violations. But the New York City Department of Buildings has a good public relations campaign. They're on social media posting about this stuff as well. So, I think they're doing a good job with it. But it's an evolving law, so we'll see how people are going to be in compliance.
Right. And now you mentioned you're a professional engineer, obviously in New Jersey, New York, and I think a multitude of other states. But you're also a qualified parking structure inspector and a qualified exterior wall inspector. So what was involved in getting those certifications? Sure.
So I mean, the professional engineering is a lot of school,
right, I know that,
a couple of hard tests, and the two certifications. Qualified exterior wall inspector and the parking inspector is sort of sitting down with the Department of Buildings and gaining their trust, showing them that you are knowledgeable in this field, showing them that you have the experience, and ethics as well, right? Because everything that we do is protecting the public. So it's an interview process, and there's probably a couple thousand exterior wall inspectors because the law has been around for several decades. There's maybe 120 parking inspectors only at this time. So, and Nova's ready to assist in that service.
Okay, great. And this would also apply to listeners that might own properties in New Jersey that might want to be proactive and just hire somebody like Nova or yourself to do that service on a volunteer basis, to be proactive and make sure before anything happens, to have it checked
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah.
It's like having an exam, a physical, before you have a problem, you want to identify to make sure you have a clean bill of health. So I think it's a really important service to do.
Prevention is the key, right?
Yes.
When you found some problem, it's a cost for the testing, for the professional like you, but there's nothing compared. You really have a problem. A lot of sickness, the doctor will say, if you knew the beginning, there's probably small procedure. But if you didn't know, after a few years, could be vital. So that's why as property owners, right? I mean, you got to take care of your asset. You got to do the regular check, annual check.
Absolutely.
Well, 5 year, 6 year, at least the minimum
5
year, 6 year check, depending if it's a building or it's a parking garage.
Exactly.
And I can imagine you could do this. There's so many buildings and so many parking garages in the city that you could work 8 days a week, 24 hours, and you could be employed for the next 30 years doing this, because there's just tons and tons of buildings, right, that after every 5 years, right?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, it goes in cycles. So, for instance, the wall ninth cycle for the FISP, the facade, just ended, and most of the buildings, hopefully all of the buildings, would have been assessed. But now we're going to go into the repairs, right? So most of them had something wrong. They were a swamp or an unsafe condition. And over the next 5 years, we're going to start repairing them and start the cycle all over again.
I'm so surprised they don't have anything about the foundation inspection. I would think the structural, not only facade, but actual the structural, the foundation.
Well, I guess for the parking garage, that's you're assessing the whole structure, because every level is supporting cars. But with buildings, that was a little bit surprising. I could see the facade, but usually a facade might be a superficial crack, and it could be cosmetic, maybe not in all circumstances. But I would think the foundation, if the building, they want to make sure the building isn't tilting, or the foundation is intact. But I guess,
well, I think that a lot of the times the laws are reactive. Almost, they're put in place to prevent something from happening again. As I mentioned, the Surfside collapse down in Miami was an impotence for other municipalities to put in structural programs. So I think that's where the law is going, and I think that we're only going to see more
laws, and this is a good start. I think that's the best way to put it. You're right. There's nothing. Fortunately, there's been no reactive need to address foundations because no buildings have collapsed from the foundation. Probably because a lot of them were built sturdily from that point, but over the facade gets the exposure to the weather and to the elements, and it cracks and needs attention on a routine basis.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, guys, we are out of time again. I want to thank you guys so much. If you want to give your contact information, Jim, so if anybody out there wants to get in touch with you for these structural inspections.
Yeah, you can always check out our website at novagroupgbc.com and flip around in service pages and see what we can offer. Or you can call me directly, 631-387-3170. Happy to help.
All right. Thank you guys so much again.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
All right. See everyone next week. Thanks. Bye.